Yeah, because you see, the guys in back of you are your agency subheads. And unlike people who carry combs or passports in their pockets in Washington, D.C., they carry knives. And if you said no, that knife was going right through you. So you turn to your four buddies after you've said yes, and you say, hey guys, I just got us $3 billion a year. Can you all get me program proposals within the next 2 months as to how we're going to spend this $3 billion a year? Now, you, and you are the four agency subheads. Are any one of you going to send in a proposal that says, well, I think this is an overblown issue and maybe we should, save our money or send it to some other organization with which we are competing? Well, then the knives are going to come out from the guys in the row and back of you because they're your worker bee scientists and you've had it. And which one of you worker bee scientists are going to submit the proposal to your boss that says that this is an overblown problem and maybe we shouldn't do anything about it? That's if you want a job elsewhere. Okay, not going to happen. Oh my God, and then you do your research and you send it off to Nature magazine, and who reviews your paper? Him! The guy over there who got the other part of the money. And your paper says this is a terrible problem and climate change is going to kill 3 billion people, and he says, oh, this paper has very few flaws. They forgot to capitalize the word whatever has to be capitalized, otherwise accept it, and it's published. Unfortunately, you're kind of probably an ass-bee like me, and you send in a paper that says, well, I think it's an overblown issue, and guess who reviews that one? Him. And he says, oh my God, this paper is so flawed, we can't publish this thing, we just can't do it. Well, the times they are changing. Judith Curry, by the way, from Georgia Tech is here in Melbourne, and I guess she couldn't come down, but she's going to be here soon. She's one of the big scientists in this area, and she tells me that the bomb that I'm going to show you at the end of this talk is very probably going to be accepted if I send it in now. 18 years is just too much of an overburden for the truth to suffer. So, anyway, but it's not just climate science. Here is the next up-and-coming person that you have never heard of. His name is Daniele Finelli. He is from the University of Montreal. He did a lot of his work at Edinburgh. He just moved there. He obviously can get away with what I can't because, like Bjorn Lomborg, he's a recognized, card-carrying lefty. And so he can get away with this. He got the equivalent of a MacArthur Fellowship in Europe. These are Genius Awards and things like that recently. And he published a paper in 2012 with the astounding conclusion that negative results are disappearing from most disciplines and countries. And in fact, this is really very impressive stuff. I'll show you this graphic here. This is the percent of positive results. Look, this is between 1990, 91, and 2007. So I test a hypothesis, and it's supported at the 0.05 level. I'm not compelled to reject it. Well, wait till the end of this talk, and we'll talk about what you're compelled to reject. But this can't be true. We can't be getting smarter like that and only testing being so good with our hypotheses. What we're doing is we're testing things that we know will give us a positive result because you got us the money from Mr. Gore. Thank you very much. Now, the implication of this is staggering because what it must mean is the number of false positives is going up at a prodigious rate. Remember that the metric that we use in science is generally the 0.05 probability level. And so 5% of a much bigger number of positive results is 5% plus X more false positives. That's why we're seeing the epidemic of rejections, the epidemic of retractions of scientific papers. It's because of the incentive system in science. And thank you very much for our funding structure and for our flashy journals for helping us do this. Now, for the next few minutes, I'd like to answer the question, how in the world we got here? Well, everybody on the liberal, meaning the Australian liberal side of the fence, knows that in America we had somebody who really, really liked government and really, really liked children to be dependent upon government, meaning the people of his country. Here is our father, Franklin Roosevelt, and all the dependent children doing Ring Around the Rosie with Mr. Roosevelt in a political cartoon from the 1930s. Well, Mr. Roosevelt was also really interested in taking over science because we had a problem. We had World War II. And Einstein signed a letter written by Leo Szilard to the president that says, well, we can conceive of a weapon that conceivably mass destructive power, paren, and BTW. The Germans are working on it too, we think. And so Mr. Roosevelt started the Manhattan Project, which was an explosive success. And then, now we can debate the morality of dropping the bomb on Hiroshima, and I think that's a very, very legitimate debate. But having said that, Mr. Roosevelt knew, he was told, it's going to work probably. And Mr. Roosevelt at the end of the war said, my God, we need to keep these scientists employed. So he wrote to Vannevar Bush, who was the head of the Office of Special Programs. The Manhattan Project was under the Office of Special Programs. I'm not going to read you the letter, but basically it said, you know, look what we did with all these scientists. New frontiers of the mind are before us, and if they are pioneered with the same vision, boldness, and drive with which we have waged this war, we can create a fuller and more fruitful employment and a fuller and more fruitful life. Welcome to big government and the Manhattan Project. And so 2 months after Vannevar Bush got this letter, he had a report out already. It was called Science, the Endless Frontier. And Science, the Endless Frontier laid the template for the nationalization of science in the United States. And we can talk a bit about Australia too. But the idea was not that the government would directly employ the scientists. Oh no, it was much cleverer than that. It was that the scientists would write research proposals through their academic institutions, through their universities. And the universities would pull off 50%, quote, overhead, end quote, and spend that on the departments that couldn't afford to run themselves. That's the root of political correctness in the academy. The academy became a welfare client of Washington, D.C. as a result of the federalization of science. When you're up for promotion and/or tenure at a university, I hate to tell you, it is that craven. How much federal money did you bring in? The question is asked. And was it private money? Oh, that's not as good as federal money, even though they're the same dollars. Yes, it's how much you helped the welfare culture within the university. And don't you think the people in the Germanic languages department really think big government is a great thing? You can see how this happened. So, oh, by the way, there were critics at the time. When Science, the Endless Frontier was written, one wag wrote, this really should have been called Science, the Endless Budget. So anyway. So that gave rise to a beer after this amiable discussion. For anyone who can identify where this image comes from and what it is, where is it from? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Atlas Shrugged, Part 1. Atlas Shrugged, Part 1. That is the State Science Institute. I am so lazy, I should have found the building. And so, instead of saying State Science Institute, that said CSIRO, because that's the way it is down here. Now, this has certain implications, because now we're going to see how science and policy go hand in hand. We've now made science public good, and that means it's subject to all kinds of public choice influences in the funding business, and that means it has its lobbies. In 2007, the Senate was debating the, quote, energy bill. This is the Bush II energy bill. And this bill had a mandate for the United States to burn up to 50% of its corn. We are the largest producer of corn in the world. And to turn it into ethanol and send it out the tailpipes of cars. Now, we can debate a lot about Hiroshima, but I can tell you morally, taking all that food and sending it out the tailpipe of a car, when a lot of people in the world are spending an awful lot of their disposable income just to keep themselves fed, that's just slightly to the left of immoral. But it is what we do. And therefore, the AAAS did what it must. It served the lobby to pass this bill. I'm driving up 12th Street in the summer of 2007 when this bill is being debated. And I look up at the AAAS building. This is a terrible, crappy image. I can't find a better image of this, so I ask for your indulgence. But yes, right when the bill was being voted on, a banner was unfurled from the building, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. It was a corn cob morphing into a gasoline pump, and it said, "Fuel for thought." And the background, in case you can't see, is a beautiful blue, pristine ocean, unpolluted with breaking waves. Okay, I get it. If this were the Cuban Academy of Sciences, it would say socialismo o muerte. We're just doing our job. They are the lobby, but that's how the incentive system works. And it was predicted by this guy. This guy was the president of Columbia University. And so he saw it happen. And after Columbia, he had another job that required kind of an exit interview or exit consultation with the people who employed him. That would be the farewell address for Dwight Eisenhower in 1961, and it contains a very, very famous statement that all the people on the left love to quote about the military-industrial complex. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Well, that's where they stop. Would have been nice if they would have looked at the next two paragraphs. The Free University, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research, partly because of the huge costs involved. A government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. Oh my God. Yet holding scientific research and discovery in respect as we should, we must also be aware to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. The prospect of dominations by the nation's scholars, by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Can anyone say State Science Institute? This is what you get. Remember, in Atlas Shrugged, the State Science Institute was instrumental in the downfall of the society because of the way that it rigged the creation of scientifically based ideas and the free flow of information in the scientific world. You know what? People are catching on. They smell a rat. Here's Garth Paltridge. Garth Paltridge from Hobart, Tasmania. Used to be with CSIRO. Big guy, retires, wrote this in Quadrant. You probably have all seen this. The average man in the street, a sensible chap who by now can smell the signs of an oversold environmental campaign from miles away, is beginning to suspect that it is politics rather than science, which is driving the issue. Yeah, no kidding. 18 years without warming, I would begin to suspect that too. And so it has had its consequences that I need not put names on nor quotations on. For example, Exhibit A, Exhibit B. Oh, Exhibit B is a good one. I have a story about him in the question and answer. Somebody will please ask me what happened when I met this man in a restroom in Washington, D.C. Nothing is made up here. And